Journal keeping takes a little bit of time, but it becomes an indispensable resource. In the 18th century, keeping a journal was often called keeping a day book, and it gives us this sense of just stopping, pausing, reflecting, and then moving forward. The journal is an instrument, a tool that helps us to become more intentional. A writer who I particularly admire is the American Trappist author and social critic Thomas Merton. He was born in 1915 and he died in 1968, and he was a consummate journal keeper. Merton described his best writing as that emanating from his journals, and his journals and journal writing scaffolded everything he wrote throughout his life. In the early 2000s, there was an interesting project called the 1,000 Journals Project. It got together an online community, and then they shared physical journals with each other. Some of the 1,000 journals returned to the United States, many did not. But on their journey, this is a photograph of some of the journals in the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, which I visited back in 2010. The journals told their own story, told personal stories of those that captured their life experience within the pages and then shared them with others. They become deeply personal, become deeply reflective, but also through the physical sharing, they become a community of practice. Many disciplines use journals as part of their ways of knowing and ways of being in their domain of knowledge, production, and co-creation. A very good example of this is the work of designers and architects. What I particularly like about the architect's journal and notebook is that it shows us thinking in action. Jennifer Moon describes the significance and importance of journal keeping. Journal keeping is about recording an experience. It helps to facilitate learning from experience. It helps to support understanding and the representation of understanding. It helps to develop critical thinking or attitudes of questioning and dispositions of intention. It helps to encourage metacognition or learning how to learn. It also helps us to become more intentional learners and also to take ownership of knowledge. It helps to increase the ability to reflect, to enhance problem solving, to enhance reflective practice. It also helps self-empowerment, creativity, and as writers, to help students to give voice to their work. I have used journal keeping with students in a number of courses over a number of years, in adult education, in art history, in the School of History, in UCC, and in areas like development studies and teaching and learning. In a sample group of 150 students at undergrad, postgrad, and continuing education, I have found that journal keeping helps develop a capacity for intention. In this, the work of Donald Schoen is central. Often we think merely about the results of our actions. We are task-orientated as human beings. But often what we're not good is in questioning the assumptions on which our actions are predicated. shown helps us to think about examining and interrogating our assumptions. And in this, journal keeping helps us to become more intentional. Of course, it's central when we're thinking about the art of writing, and we can visit tools such as concept maps that help us to become more intentional in our action, in planning the essay, planning the thesis, planning, devising, and returning in these creative and iterative stages, in planning, designing, and then enacting the work in which we are performing. Keeping a journal takes a little bit of time, but I use the following processes. First thing I do is, for an entry, I will date and describe a situation or an encounter or an experience. This may be 1 or 2 lines. I then may add additional material to enhance that initial description. Then I may leave it for a while and return and reflect, mull over the significance of that experience, that event. And then this helps me to move on to take some action, to engage in some critical endeavour. So those 4 stages again: the dating, the describing, adding additional material, reflection, and then resolving to take action, I find particularly useful in being intentional in my journal keeping. I've also incorporated journaling in assessment criteria. Here, for example, I'm using it in inclusion studies. You can see that I use a series of entries that reflect upon what it means to make a critical intervention, to observe, to reflect, to take action. And I think reflection, although I've looked at it in this context within an analog format, it is also applicable to the digital realm, because what we are using with these tools is the enhancement. They are a type of digital prosthesis that helps to enhance our embodiment. But at the heart of the analog and the digital is that moment of intentional awareness, of being intentional, examining our assumptions, to perform an action that then leads to an intentional and deliberate moment to consequence. Thank you.